Last launched until end of August. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Baird. I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Ninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. Additionally, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. And of course, thank you all so much for being here for a very special Winnipeg launch of Like a River Divides the Earth, a brand new collection of stories from Dora Dueck. Give her a round of applause. Gratitude goes out to Freehand Books for publishing this book and for helping us make this event a reality. And of course to Sue Sorensen for graciously coming on board to host. Let's give her a round of applause as well. And so to give you a sense of how the evening will flow, in just a moment, we'll invite Dora up to read a section from her book. Following that, Dora will join Sue in conversation over here at the stands. And following that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So please let those percolate throughout the evening. And when the time does come, all I ask is that you raise your hand nice and high, and then I'll pass this wireless microphone to you, which is simply to ensure that you're heard on tonight's live stream for the folks who are watching at home. And then I'll be back at the end of the event as well to review how the signing procedure will go, which of course will take place at the table to my right. But now I have the absolute pleasure of introducing tonight's very special guests. Your host, Sue Sorensen, lives in Winnipeg and teaches at Canadian Mennonite University, where she is also the director of CMU Press. Sue is the author of the poetry collection, Acutely Life, and the novel, A Large Harmonium. Her next novel, Afterbuster, will be published by Dundurn Press in 2027. And our featured guest, Dora Dueck, is the author of 4 books of fiction and a collection of essays and memoir, as well as essays, stories, and poetry in a variety of journals. Honors include the McNally Robinson Book of the Year Award, the High Plains Book Award for short fiction, and the winner of the Mahalat Review's Novella Contest. She blogs now and then at www.doradueck.com. And a longtime resident of Winnipeg, she now lives in Delta, BC. So please join me in welcoming Dora Dueck.
Thank you, Daniel. It's so good to be back in Winnipeg with all your dramatic weather. The other day in BC, I heard it thunder, but I honestly didn't know what it was. But it was just so wonderful. And I look over the people in this room, and you represent connections and friendships and family, and just so much that 40 years of living here gave me. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful and happy to come back and share this book with you. And I echo the thanks to Sue, who just came off a very busy time with Nightberries, a new novel at CMU Press. And she's been my editor and publisher of 2 of my books. And this one was published by Freehand, also a very fine publisher. And I'm so grateful to them. And a special thanks that my daughter and daughter-in-law are here. They now live in Winnipeg, so I will maybe be back even more often. So it's hard to describe a collection of short stories. It's a little harder than a novel because each story is different. But I thought I would just briefly describe each of the 5 stories and try to entice you with snippets from 3 of them. So the first story, Mask, appeared in the Malahat Review in 2014, I believe it was. And it came out of the awfulness of the First World War, which I, for some strange reason, find that I lament in a very, very deep way, the First World War. And In this war, there was, of course, so many young men killed, but also really awful wounds. So I'll just read the first paragraph of the story. And the narrator is Jane. I was 14 before I saw my father's face. The ruins, I mean, the face behind the mask. Holes instead of a nose. Dark holes in a pink crater of pulled-tight skin running from cheekbone to cheekbone, though the tip had been spared and stood there by itself, pale and hideous, as if too stubborn or stupid to quit when abandoned. Nostrils like tiny arches, and where his right eye should have been, he had a crater too. That's the first paragraph. Then I'm going to just skip ahead to, it's a story about the father, and when facial reconstruction was in its pioneer stage, and when they couldn't do enough with that, they created masks for the men to wear. And it also, in terms of a larger theme, which I think we can all relate to, describes a person caught between the vision about the war of the father and mother, competing visions. And there's a lot about appearance, obviously. So let me just find this other paragraph. So Mom did a lot of talking to Jane about her life and Dad's, Charlie's. Mom would flourish 2 old photographs out of our suitcase like treats. This is when they visited the grandparents. One depicted her and her Charlie, my father, soon after they'd met. Look, Jane, darling, she would say liltingly, look at him. Isn't he handsome? I loved this voice of hers and the giggles that followed, as if she'd lost track of being my mother and was only the dolly with whom Charlie had fallen in love. I wasn't the least bit jealous of her disappearing into raptures. They seemed original to me and romantic, not tinged with her usual resolve. I gazed at the photo as long as I could. I tried to keep Mom in the place it took her, she and Dad in front of an iron-locked gate, their faces not close to the camera, but certainly looking fine at a distance. Dad tall, Mom barely to his shoulder, he in a plain working-class suit set off with a bow tie, cap at an angle, and she in a striped blouse and dark skirt, a ring of flowers on the rim of her hat. After a while, she generally said, oh, don't I look like I have a pot of petunias on my head? And then we laughed as if to break a spell, to return from Dolly and Charlie to me and Mom. The second story is the most recent one that I wrote, and it's about 4 women who, and I read about this trend in the paper, who've chosen to live together for financial reasons and companionship. And yeah, it's called Blue. I'll read the beginning of that. After Sigrid walks into the bay one night, then drowns, everything Lily remembers about her appears otherwise than before. It's not her first grief. She knows well enough how death can alter the landscape of the past. But the compulsion to wander about in it, to remember and review, to regret, unsettles her again. She's not ready for it. She finds it hampering, finds that she's weak, too weak to resist it. Conversations trivial as pebbles seem boulders now. Frustrations slight as cracks are crevasses. Everything begging for, demanding from her some understanding, significance, even exoneration. For example, one day, several months before it happened, Sigrid remarked to Lily that she intended, before she died, she said, to use up all the little bottles of shampoo and conditioner she'd taken from hotels. All the little soaps, all the little toothpastes she bought for her travels and hadn't finished. A few squeezes of paste left in every tube. She said she had quite a lot of them. But when they emptied her room later, there wasn't a tiny bottle of soap or toothpaste tube anywhere. So was there some forecast in the comment? Lily recalls it as lighthearted, possibly a joke, but the trouble was, she had never been able to read Sigrid properly, had she? It's the beginning of Blue. The third story, and there's two stories in the book that come out of Mennonite historical events. And this one rises out of, it's called Her Own Self. Out of the Germans and Mennonites converged in Moscow in 1929. They heard there had been some passes given for exit, and they hoped to gain them. I'm rounding off here, with some 13,000 gathered in Moscow, only about 5 were allowed to leave. So this is, it's a story about that. And what interested me in that is, and again, I think it's something we can relate to, fictional Herman carries and champions the big narrative, because the 5,000 that we were able to get out, the group identity that's determined by these immigration events or other kinds of events. And fictional Marta, she tries to hang on to a sense of self in the face of it, of her own personal loss, and of some guilt and unresolved resentment. And so there's a marriage in it. There's 2 sisters. That's all I'll say about that. I don't have that much time to read, otherwise I would read from the story. The fourth story is called The Regatta. It's the first story I wrote when I started writing stories like 40 years ago. And it's a simple story about a mother and son, and something, yeah, just so simple in some ways. Mother feeling no, and son feeling may I please, and then there's yes, but it sat on my files, and I have to say it kind of haunted me. Like I was hearing something in the story, in the character of this mother, and I didn't know how. It took me a long time to figure out how to present it. So right now it's told, and I guess that's how it's going to stay. It's told by someone who hears her, almost like a confession, I guess, of this event. And she's put it together from the son and her perspective. And I think it deepens it and confuses it maybe even more. Anyways, I'm really, really glad to finally get that one out of my files. The last story is the title story of the book, Like a River Divides the Earth. And now I'm going to ask a question. How many of you here, and I think some hands will go up, have heard of Shumanovka? John, Isaac, haven't you? Okay. What about the Amur River? Yeah. So anyways, at the end of the 1920s, when some Mennonites were trying to get out by Moscow, others had gone to the very farthest reaches of the Soviet Union and formed some villages in close to the Amur River, which is the border with China. It's the 10th longest river in the world. It's a very wide at the point where the Mennonite villages were. And the settlers just assumed that, Stalin's arm wasn't too long to reach that far. it turns out it was, and so they began to feel very restricted, and so they concocted this daring, very bold escape plan, and an entire village crossed the frozen Amur River in the dead of a December winter night. However, and this is what the story relates to, they were going to go with another village, and on the last evening, well, let's say they didn't keep their promise to wait. The village was betrayed. So this other story of the marvelous escape has been so celebrated and written about. Rudy Reeves, the Blue Mountains of China, and so on. I'm interested in people who don't get the miracles. And so, yeah. And how does one survive betrayal? And what if your girlfriend is in the village that got across and you didn't? I'll just read the beginning of it. Shumanovka. Nikolai hears the word. It's said by the man across from him, every syllable distinct, but almost alien in the man's way of speaking, stretched out. But there's a lilt in it too, and that's a surprise, and he doesn't like the surprise. He wasn't thinking about this word, this name, not at all, nor what it contains for him, so deep in the layers of his life by now. And then again, Shumanovka. He winces, he feels afraid. The man, a guest, is free with it as if he knows it well, caressing the beats like warm, thick fur. And for a moment, the village street seems to materialize above the coffee and buns and pickles and cake. The wintry street as long as an arrow through his mind again, the empty houses, the shock of that emptiness in the glare of an unfriendly morning sun. It hovers, then dissolves into the sounds and motions of their eating. The man is going on to mention the river, the Amur River, he says. Nikolai gulps at his coffee, draws in the heat, its consoling smell. Does a river have a smell? Does ice? His daughter Anna beside him, that is, when she's not jumping up to the kitchen for some reason or another. Her voice is gentle, urgent, a question for you, Papa. Nikolai sets down his cup, looks up. The man is repeating himself, louder, as if Nikolai is dead. The man is asking what he knows of Shumanovka.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Dora. As we were walking up, Dora said, maybe this is my last book, so I hope you will all, each one of you will come and tell her no. She's not done yet. There's plenty more, plenty more to come, I hope. Dora, what a pleasure to hear you read from this book, which I just finished reading this week, and I have so many feelings and questions about it. But I'll just say, I think I've read all your books, and I've edited 2 of them, which was a very pleasurable experience. I love all of your books, but this one might be my favorite. And there's a lot of beauty here and wisdom. Best of all, lots of surprises. And I won't say that your other books didn't surprise me, but there are moments here that I didn't expect at all. So I love that about, I don't want to read something where I can guess what's happening. And you are a writer that I trust. So I think I was listening to people talk about your writing as they came into the room. And I think that kind of trustworthy truth-telling is important. So thank you for this beautiful book.
Yeah. Somebody told my son that it's kind of risque. Where? But anyways, I'll let you look for it.
So you mentioned as you were reading, these are 5 very distinct stories. And 2 of them are really novellas. The first one, Mask, won a novella prize. I'd say the last one is a novella too, but they're very distinct from one another. And it's lovely because I would start each one with a sense of adventure. Like I didn't know they vary widely in geography and in time. But the binding of the element, I think, is your voice, which is very observant and careful always. So how do you set out to create a collection of stories? This is your second collection of stories, but I assume the publisher and the editor have a lot to do, but did you have a sense of what sort of collection you wanted to create?
Well, I remember like the 2 Mennonite stories have really been in my head for literally decades, and I just felt I needed to get them written. And I thought even if they're never published, they need to, get out. And then I thought of Mask, and I thought, okay, that, you're allowed to anchor with a published story. And so then, you're looking around, what else do I have? And yeah, thinking, I think I have a collection here. And in a weird way, I feel like it does say kind of everything I want to say. So that's why I think I'm done. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't. And my husband had died in 1921, and then 2021. Yeah, sorry. I'm back in the day here with my Mennonite forebears, but 2021. And I think at some point too, it was a good thing to work on. And I went to the St. Peter's Monastery in Saskatchewan and kind of finished up the 5 stories together, the sense of them. Yeah, so it was a gift in that sense, just to have a focus.
You are trained as a historian. I mean, these are lovely stories, but can you talk a little bit about the connection between sort of story and history, and whether you do have to do a lot of historical research for your stories, or perhaps that's just in your bones, you love to do historical research?
I love to research, yeah. I could just do it all the time and not do anything else with it, It's just so fascinating. But a lot of this knowledge of the 2 stories come from Helmut's family, because his parents came in 1929. So that story was one that I heard very much in his clan. And then also in Paraguay, there's a group of villages called the Harbina Eka, the refugees from Harbin, which was the city in China that the people that got across went to. And so I heard the triumph story there, about those that had got out. So, but in addition, of course, I did do quite a bit of research. And the challenge, Sue, for using history is, you don't want to bog down with the history. The story is really still important, and it needs to have a theme that feels universal. Like we've all experienced disappointment, and I'm hoping that that comes through even as I try to, like the Amur River story, very hard to explain without over detailing it. And so I had to I tried to pull it back a little bit. The story out of the First World War, I think that's culturally fairly well still known. So I didn't worry about those references too much. I assumed people would get them.
I think one of the things that can keep these historical stories intriguing and fresh is to do things with point of view. So you've got two sort of male stories here. I mean, one of them told from a male chaplain who's listening to the woman who wants to tell the story about her son, and then Nikolai in the last story. So I think that's one of the ways of making these historical stories sort of seem intriguing and fresh is that you're not always writing from one sort of recognizable point of view that might be something you're very familiar with, but you're trying out different points of view, including men, which is cool. I don't know if that was hard to do.
Well, somebody asked, how do you know so much about men? And I thought, I don't know, to me, they're humans, you know? Like, how do you know so much about humans? It just, the last story, in some ways, I mean, it sounds crazy, but the story becomes the master and you have to serve it. And it demanded to be told, to be referenced, like Nikolai had to be that story. I don't know how else to explain it, but, and I like him. I like him so much. Yeah. He's really one of my favorites. And the other one, the chaplain, is kind of a non-entity though, in a way.
Sort of mysterious.
He is mysterious.
He's a listener.
He's a listener and it's affecting him. I mean, you know how sometimes you're visiting with somebody and all of a sudden they tell a really long kind of compelling story and you keep wanting to ask questions, but you don't. And then later on, it affects you in some strange way, and I think that's sort of, but yeah, he's not too.
I was thinking about characters and how a novelist, how a short story writer goes about creating characters, which is it's different, of course, for every writer. But I don't write a lot of fiction, but when I do, I sometimes think about my characters as my imaginary friends or little dolls that I can do things with, but in a serious way, of course. And I'm wondering how you create your characters. One of the things I noticed about this book is that you don't let your characters off easily. None of them are perfect, but you tend to not stand in judgment of them, although sometimes I think they warranted some sharp judgment. So can you talk a little bit about how your characters came to be?
Yeah, I mean, again, each story is different, and Mask. I was reading a book called Into the Silence: The Great War, Mallory, and the Conquest of Everest. And there was a line in there about these camps for men who had been wounded in the face. And I don't know, it just like this story just sort of flooded into me, and I somehow knew it would be a father, you know, a soldier father, and a mother who pulls up the glory of war. And in between them, his daughter. So that's how she came to me. Marta, again, just she was so easy to write. I don't know how to explain it. Others are like the characters can be very resistant too. You know, like they don't allow you to play with them too much. They want to be who they are, and yeah, if you you know, if I go back to my journal, like I just found quite a few hours on Mass today, overwhelmed and a little discouraged, you know, and just entry after entry like that, like to figure out and this the regatta to how to you know to communicate that story. And I workshopped it at a Banff week that I did. And nobody liked the sort of Russian doll aspect of it, you know, the story within the story. But again, that's what the story wanted, so I did it.
Well, I like that a lot, and these stories, I think all of them have not incredibly complicated structures, but fairly complicated structures where there's a lot of retrospect, people thinking back, and then it's not really flashbacks so much, but people thinking about the past, and the story will shift. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, do you do tons of drafting and redrafting and redrafting? Or
Yes, I do. I remember, this different scenes will come. Once you've opened yourself to a story, and I think the writers in the room know this, once you've opened it, it's like a door, scenes will fly in. And so, I would write the scenes, but then in which order should they be? So then I'm cutting it, all these paragraphs into pieces, and they're all on the floor. And I'm, trying to find the structure. So yeah, lots of rewriting. Some less, again, there's stories of.
I think people are often interested in the craft of writing, so I don't mind. I hope you don't mind if I ask a few more craft questions. One is, I think that the 5 stories in this book have some of the best beginnings I've ever heard. And she read a couple of them. I want to just read a couple of opening passages again and ask you about beginnings. So I think these are sort of show-stopping, grab your attention beginnings. And I'm just wondering how these really good openings come to you. And she read the opening sentence of Mask, which is, "I was 14 before I saw my father's face." That is brilliant, right? That is such a simple thing, but such an effective opening. And they all have openings like that. The opening of Her Own Self, the 3rd story, is, "We have to leave this evening," he whispered. "We can't put it off," right? And you have to read that story. You have to read those. So I'm wondering how these great beginnings happen for you.
Well, each of the stories had a different beginning originally. And again, I think the writers in the room will know this. The draft that you write is not, the place you start your draft is not necessarily the place that you start your final story. And so again, I think that's looking for the place to begin, how to begin. I wish I was more useful in this matter of craft.
Are beginnings easier than endings? I find beginnings easier than endings. I don't know how to end things, but
Yeah. I can't say that.
maybe they just happen for you.
I don't know.
My last item on craft is Dora's metaphors. So I'm a professor, right? So I'm marking this up as I go along. And I found that this is actually quite a slow book to read because I kept stopping to put little stars and arrows and things the way that I do. And I found that I didn't want the book to end. So I started being slower and slower, which is unusual for me. But when I come across a metaphor that I like, and if I like a metaphor, it's because it's fresh. If you've heard it before, then it's a cliche. And I put a little I in the margin for imagery, right? So I'll read you just a couple of things that Dora. I could give you a long list of her metaphors, but I'll give you just a few examples. So from the story Blue, and this is a woman whose son has died. And she says, "He became like a seed to her, and sometimes when walking in the forest, a tree." In the story Her Own Self, talking about Mennonites gathering in Moscow in 1929 to try to emigrate, they kept coming, her people, like a trail of ants after sugar. And then a man who cannot stop talking in the same story about the story of Mennonite migration. And from his his wife's point of view, he's talking about it too much. But he recited the chronology, related anecdotes in their tiniest detail, like cracking walnuts open at Christmas, she thought, digging out every compartment of the shell. And lots like that. So I don't know, I mean, we look to poets, and you have written poetry. We look to poets for metaphors, but I love it when a novelist or a short story writer also gives us really powerful figurative language. Do you aim to do that? Or again, does that just sort of happen?
Well, I think I do try to look for ways to describe things without overdoing it. I mean, as you read books, you're just one image after the other, and you try to get back to the story. No, I guess because I like that kind of book myself, I do think about how I might describe something. Yeah, I do.
It's true that I think the best writers are writing the kind of book that they want to read.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure the readers realize this, you know, but that we're sort of we're writing because this is what we want to be finding out there in the world. It seems to me that the two stories that are explicitly about Mennonite characters, although in the other stories too, but that you're giving your characters permission to be angry. And it's a particular kind of anger, and I'm calling it intelligent anger as opposed to bitterness. But I haven't read every single Mennonite book, but it seems to me that this is something not completely brand new in Mennonite fiction, but a little new to allow characters to be angry. I don't know if I'm putting that well enough, but it does seem to me that there's some, yeah, I'm going to go with intelligent anger in these characters.
I'm trying to think of where they're angry. No, I mean, I think certainly Nikolai, it's the anger of grief and loss, and life not turning out the way he expected.
And in Mask, which isn't a Mennonite story,
Yeah.
but the
There,
girls,
yeah.
you know,
Oh, the father there is
the
angry.
father,
Yes,
the father is
yes.
angry. There's no communication really between the father and the daughter. She wants it. She's getting too much communication with her mother.
Yes, in that one, there's for sure. Yeah.
But I'd say all of them. I mean, there's just this in the regatta, you've got this son in a wheelchair and a mother who doesn't want to push him up a hill, and then says, yes, I'll push you up the hill, but it's too late. The regatta is over, right? So, I mean, that's interesting, and it's clear that she's dealing with that then for the rest of her life, and so is he. And they haven't figured out what to do with it, except she does come to this chaplain and tell it. So maybe anger isn't the right term, but I mean,
No,
yeah.
Now that you've given me examples, okay.
Yeah. But I just found that very refreshing. I liked that a lot. One of the things that is perhaps more evident to you yourself is that a lot of these stories are about loss of all kinds. And sometimes it will be like the loss of a loved one, but sometimes it'll be like the loss of a very small thing. And my example is in the story Blue, where the main character, her sister, when they were young, has taken the color blue as her favorite color, and she wanted it, and she got purple instead. And she's been upset about this in a low-key way her whole life. But then, you know, when she finally talks to her sister about it, her sister doesn't remember it at all, of course. So that's a small instance, but something where, you know, sometimes it's much larger things. The same woman is mourning the loss of a son. But you seem to me to be particularly good at sort of sculpting how long loss takes to, you know, become reconciled within us, if it ever is.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I suppose as writers, that's partly what we're doing ourselves, is that we're writing through, everybody has loss, we're writing through it, and by writing about it, that helps us to reconcile a little. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And, you know, there's so many of, I mean, the moments sometimes of reconciliation are so small, but it's not that there hasn't been a relationship up to that point, but every once in a while, it's almost like we can push through the veil and we make such a genuine, small moment. Yeah, and you know, when I'm thinking about parents and children, like I'm very blessed to have a good relationship with my children, but I think that I never comprehended the inner lives of my children as a mother. I mean, you assume you know your children, you know how they're acting and so on. And I think that's the fate of generations, and I would say the same for my parents, you know, me to them. But we do touch each other, right?
And that's what the mother in the regatta asks the chaplain, right? Can a person know her children, right? And she's looking for a certain kind of answer. And in that case, she doesn't get it. But in some of the stories, people do get that little, you know, they just want that affirmation about the loss. And in Mask, for example, the daughter who has never really spoken to her father and has only seen his face once because he has this mask, just in one of her mother's letters, he's written one line to her, you know, love dad, basically. And that means everything to her. It's one simple sentence. So, and in that case, it works for her. That helps her a lot. Sometimes those little things don't happen, and sometimes they do. We actually have a COVID story in here a little bit, and I'm wondering, you know, how you felt writing about COVID. This will be my last question, and then we'll open it up a bit. It's not a COVID story, but in the second story, Blue, which you said was your most recent story, COVID does happen in it, and you describe these 4 women who are living, you know, sharing a house together, living through COVID. And I know people have different feelings about whether they want to read about COVID or not. I had an argument with my sister about it. She said, I want to read a COVID novel. And I said, I don't. So I'm wondering, you know, but it's important, I think, that we put that particular experience in fiction. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about, you know, writing about COVID?
Yeah, well, I think it tests their interactions in an interesting way. That's sort of, I mean, if you're, I think that 4 women living together, it could be extremely successful. But if you really are stuck inside with each other, like COVID, it does test things more of a way.
And I think that, you know, you've always had this keen interest in history, and now we have, you know, we have the responsibility of creating the history of this pandemic. And one of the ways will be to write about it. And it's so close that it's hard for us to think of it as history, but we have to.
Yeah, it's not a huge, well, I think it's quite a, yeah, it's a part of the story. But I agree. I think writers coming up, oh my goodness, they're so, like, this whole time we're living through. Wow.
Yeah. How do you write about it?
How do you write about it? Yeah. Thank you, Sue.
Well, like Daniel, you can let us know if there's anybody online who wants to ask a question, and Daniel will come and hand a mic if you want to if you have a comment or a question. You can wave your hand, and Daniel will bring you the mic.
Exactly, yeah. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand nice and high and I'll come by. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Dora. I look forward to reading this book. You talked about one story that you had hidden away in your files for years, and then you brought it out. What if you could say a bit more about that process of how you draw on your material and how you pull things out, and when you know when it's time to pull things out to write something from it? Just that little bit of that narrative struck me, and I was wondering about the process.
Yeah. Well, I actually have, thank you for that question. I have started stories in the past and they've landed in the file, and then when I'm trying to kind of, clear things a little bit for the sake of my kids. So, I have discarded many, like somehow there are things that last and things that don't, and I'm not always sure, other than it still feels important, or you remember maybe the initial impulse and that hasn't been satisfied in another story. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think you mentioned even that you felt, I don't know, did you use the word haunted? But that, yeah, that was sort of,
yeah.
it was sort of nibbling away at you.
Mhm.
Byron and I have been in a writing group together that fell apart during COVID, but I found that writing groups helped with that sort of thing, where you could bring some old piece forward and say, should I keep working on this? And the writing group would say yes or no. But have you ever been part of a writing circle like this?
Oh, yeah. Well, some of my old writing circle people are here. We were always so kind to each other. Nobody said, throw this away. This is a little off the track, but something very interesting happened in this story of the four women. Names are very important to me. So what's the name of the character, for some reason? And so the main character is Lily. And I almost like finished the story. And then I thought, I think I've used Lily before. Try not to repeat names. And I went searching, like honestly, maybe you don't believe this, but a person does forget a lot of things that you've written. And Laura Calmer at the Emmy Herald had invited me one time to write a short story for their summer issue or something. And it was a woman named Lily who had lost her son. And I knew it was the backstory of Lily in the story. It was just like, and not that it even came into this new story. It just kind of seemed like a little divine smile. Just that I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, I've been there with her before, with grief, so.
I think some of those old stories or old poems or whatever, it's nice to come across them by accident and then read them as if somebody else wrote them, and you think, and then you sort of know, no, it's not worth it, or yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I think my book of poems that came out last year, there were poems there that were 20, 25 years old, and I picked them up, after 2 decades and said, oh, now I know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But it's like it's someone else's poem by that point, so you are free to do all
I think
sorts of
that's
things.
and that's true too about craft. Like once a story is set aside, and when I come back to it, and if I enjoy reading it myself, I know it's pretty well done. Otherwise, if I'm reading it and frustrated and it's not working, and Okay, it's not done. That's the point.
We have time for a couple more questions if there's anybody.
Mallory.
No, I'm interested in, is there a character, which character in this book do you see yourself most in? That was nice.
Well, I've been thinking about that. I think in one of my previous novels, there was much more of me. I think I can say pretty truthfully that there's no autobiography here, which doesn't mean that I haven't experienced disappointment or the emotions, like you draw on your emotions that you know or other things, but who's the most like me?
So when you say previous novel, probably the character and all that.
All that belongs,
Belongs,
yeah.
yeah.
I think there was a lot there that again was drawing more deeply out of things that I had experienced myself. So, sorry. But you know what? The thing is, readers tell you actually what you've written. So I've already learned things about this book that I didn't know, you know, so maybe someone say, oh yeah, that's where you are.
Thought I saw another hand around here. Could have been wrong. Okay, is there any more questions before we go to the signing portion? Yeah, for sure.
Dora, you do both fiction and nonfiction and do both well. Do you find either one or the other more compelling or more satisfying or more urgent or more important or more difficult?
That's like a thesaurus of questions, Sarah. You had so many words. Yeah, you know what, I think it goes with the stage in life. You know, there was a time when I had the time and energy to write a novel. And so that was fiction. And I really, really enjoyed writing. I like writing essays. So that was the book that Sue did, and memoir.
Return Stroke, which you can buy. I don't know if in this store, but I'll sell you.
Yeah, so whatever has kind of come up seems the most urgent at the moment because I'm usually way behind at my deadline, but at this stage of life now, if I do any more writing, I feel more compelled to do essays, like memoirish type little pieces and so on. I think it's just belongs to the stage of life, you know, where you're reviewing and thinking. So right now, yeah, the door is not open to any stories, so I don't know how they're going to get in.
As someone who has edited both Dora's fiction and nonfiction, I don't know if you agree, Sarah, but I don't see a strong dividing line between them. They are very, there's an overlap there, right? Her essays and her memoir in Return Stroke have all of the best qualities of fiction, but they're all true, right? But there's, you know, the writing is beautiful in there. So I think you're one of those writers who the fiction and nonfiction are very, you know, very closely related to each other in an excellent way. Sarah agrees.
Well, Sarah, you've written in quite a few genres as well, so, or, you know, nonfiction, fiction, poetry. Yeah. I started to dabble in poetry, but oh my, that's a losing game, I tell you. I'm just too wordy for poetry. I admire poets, I should say. I love poetry, and some of the best are here this evening.
Do we have another question? Could have sworn I saw another hand pop up when another one did. Okay. All right, let's move on to the signing portion, everybody. Let's give Dora a big round of applause. One thing before, the way the signing works is we're going to clear a little bit of space over here to make it a little bit more accessible. Please feel free to have a book signed before you pay for it. So long as you visit the cash desk before you leave, that makes them happy. Thank you all so much for being here in person, even with this rain we've been having. Huge thanks, both in person and online. Big thank you to Sue Sorensen for coming out to host. Let's give her a round of applause. And of course, biggest round of applause for Dora Dueck.
Also for this store. Oh my goodness, let me back to the camera. Yeah, just a store unlike any other. Yeah. And for all of you for coming again, my deepest, deepest thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely night.